Welcome back to the Wardrobe of Woe, and for today's video we're going to be taking a look at and analyzing the champion list for the LVO 2023. This was a very fun list to analyze and take a look at, and the champion himself provided some commentary on how his list worked, and I took some various bits from that as well as my own analysis to bring to you a video explaining how it works. So without further ado, let's get started. Before we get started, for those of you that don't know, LVO is the Las Vegas Open. It is a gargantuan wargaming convention held once every year, generally in the beginning of the year around around January. At this convention, the largest Games Workshop tournaments are held. This is for most Games Workshop systems, predominantly Warhammer 40k and Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Uh, Additionally, the LVO is seen by many in the community as the best of the best, the world tournament, so to speak. It has the best players and the best armies on display. A very fantastic little convention, and if you ever get the chance to go, I highly recommend. It's a fantastic experience. The champion this year was Jinhua Noah Singh's Beast of Chaos list. I apologize if I am pronouncing your name wrong. He gave Spawn as his subfaction, Take What's Theirs Grand Strategy, and Indomitable Triumph. For core battalions, he had a Bounty Hunter Battalion, Expert Conquerors, and a Warlord Battalion. For his Warlord Battalion, he took an additional enhancement for Artifact, and this comes out to 1,999 points. It has 159 wounds and 10 drops. For the leaders, we have a Beast Lord with the mutable Gnarlblade artifact, which increases the damage of his melee weapon at the cost of potentially doing some damage back to him. He's bringing a Dragon Ogre Shoggoth with a very good artifact to potentially turn off a spell cast for a turn once per battle, as well as just being a good initial monster. Then we have the Zangor Shaman, which is his general to give him Zangors as battle line, as well as having a lot of magical spellcasting and a potentially mega cast at +3 if you really need a spell to go off. Then lastly, we have a interesting pick to say the least. It's definitely a good one, just one that I always kind of seem to forget about. Ganache or Grashrak, excuse me, Fellhoof. It is the Warhammer Underworlds warband, and he is bringing him almost exclusively for the movement bonus that he provides. He gives all Bray Fray units nearby a +3 to charge, which is the majority of his army. For battle line, we have a large block of 30 Zangors, and then 2 small blocks of Gors. For other units, we have 2 reinforced units of Zangor Enlightened on discs, and the Grashrax Despoilers unit. And then finally, we have the Wildfire Taurus Endless spell. So, what does this list do well, and where is it kind of falling short? When I was analyzing this list, I couldn't find too many things that fell short of this list. It is the championship list, of course, but there was a few things that I think you would just have to be aware of and make sure to play around them. But for the pros, this list has a ton of flexibility to counter and adapt to most opponents. The champion himself said in an interview that he designed this list with the various top armies in mind and how to give himself tools to adapt and kind of counter his counters, so to speak. The list on general is extremely fast with the +3 from the warband or the Warhammer Underworlds warband. You get a ton of rend just kind of inherently with Beast of Chaos, but this one emphasizes the rend even more. So a lot of things won't even get a save against him. And this is a very high damage list. Very much a punch you once and punch you hard, all the while regenerating bodies as he disengages from the fight and rallies. Some cons with this list, though, is it is a 10 drop, meaning that if an opponent chooses to, they can most likely outdrop you, getting the choice on turn 1. It has a ton of moving parts and a lot of different buffs and synergies that you need to keep in mind, and so it could be difficult to play. And initially, there's only one monster. Of course, you can summon more with the Hearthstone and Primordial Call, but at the start, you only have the Dragon Ogre Shoggoth. Now to take a look at the heroes specifically and what they would do for this list. The Beast Lord is a inexpensive vessel for the mutating Gnarlblade to make him a very aggressive, deadly beatstick. 6 attacks at 3 damage each, with various pluses to wound and hit and rend, means that you're just going to do a lot of damage. And if he kills something, the Beast Lord that is, you get a plus to either wound or hit depending on what you kill for things nearby him. So very useful. You'll just have to try and stack up your units to make use of that. The Dragon Ogre Shoggoth here is your initial monster. It has a very useful spell. It's a dangerous melee threat, and you get a critical spell deny. It's just kind of a toolbox to use in however the champion saw fit. A fantastic pick that I didn't really expect. Then we have the Zangor Shaman. Now this is your general, so you can get that big block of Zangors, and this is your main magical source. This is where you're going to get your most casts, and he has the Sorceress Elixir for a once per battle mega cast at a +3. Very, very powerful, very good magic support. And then lastly, we have the Warhammer Underworld's Warband leader, Grashrak Fellhoof. He is predominantly here to give the increased movement aura, and this is further protected by his damage pass-off ability with his Warband. If they're nearby, they kind of give him a bodyguard role. So he's there to stand by and shout and scream and make all the other beasts go fast. For the battle line, it's a fairly simple look at what's going on. The biggest thing here is the 30 Zangors. They are your main battle force. They have a ton of wounds and a 4+ rally, meaning that they are going to be very difficult to completely get rid of if you play them correctly. They're very fast and they have a ton of attacks. They can just kind of mulch through a lot of things with all of the rend that Beasts of Chaos has. They are a very good anvil that can kind of bite back. Your gores here, they are just kind of a cheap unit that can be used for a bunch of things. They are potential primordial call points to summon in more monsters or just whatever you need at the time. And you can deep strike them and get them into combat for very little to tie up something valuable or to just otherwise annoy your opponent and get some movement shenanigans going. He has 2 of these units. Lastly, we are looking at the other units and his Endless spell. He has 2 units of Reinforced Zangor Enlightened, and these 2 are where most of his damage is coming from. These are his Devastating Bounty Hunter Hammers. They are very, very quick, and with with various army synergies, pretty much nothing except with 2-up save and other save stacking things on them, you won't get a save. They have very, very high rend and some very good melee. They're pretty much where most of his damage is coming from, and they're the biggest threat in his army to the point where the opponent just can't ignore them. And then he has the Grashrak's Despoilers. They're there because you need them for Grashrak, and they are bodyguard. Moving on to the final unit in the list, the Wildfire Taurus. This is what seems to me kind of a filler unit, as well as a potential synergy to give him more initiative in combat for combos. If you don't know what the Wildfire Taurus does, it can do some damage to things that it passes over or where it ends up, and it can potentially give units nearby a fight last effect, which can synergize with Beasts of Chaos to let them stack up attacks and kill you before you can have a chance to fight back. Before we end off the episode, I'd like to give thanks to my Patreon supporters. You guys are fantastic, and I appreciate each and every one of you. If you'd like to join the Patreon, there will be a link in the description below. So that was a look at the LVO 2023 top list. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more of this type of content in the future, consider subscribing. This has been the Wargrove of Woe, and I'll talk to you guys next time.